You are in the shower right now. Not really, but your brain is. You are standing under the water and your body is there, doing the thing. Soap, rinse, the usual. But somewhere inside your head, a completely different version of your life is playing. Maybe you are having the argument you never had. The one where you finally say everything you should have said 6 months ago. Every word is perfect. The other person has no response. You win so completely it is almost cinematic. Or maybe you are somewhere else entirely. You are the version of yourself that made the other choice, took the other job, sent the message, stayed, left, said yes, said no. And in that version, everything feels slightly different, slightly better, slightly more like the life that was supposed to be yours. Then the water goes cold, and you are back. This happens to you more than you realize. It happens to almost everyone. And the reason why it happens, the actual neuroscience underneath it, is one of the strangest and most human stories in all of psychology. Here is where it starts. Harvard psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert built an iPhone app and used it to ping 2,250 adults at random moments throughout their days. At each ping, the app asked 3 things. What are you doing right now? Is your mind on that or somewhere else? And how do you feel? They gathered 250,000 real-time data points from real people in real moments of real life. And what they found should stop you completely. People spent 46.9% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they were doing. Not occasionally, not when bored. Nearly half of every conscious hour. While driving, while eating, while talking to someone right in front of them. The mind was somewhere else, running a scenario, rehearsing a conversation, imagining a version of events that had not happened and might never happen. And the headline that came out of that study was 4 words. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. But that is only the surface of the story. Because the deeper question is not whether it makes you unhappy. The deeper question is why your brain does it at all. Why does the most sophisticated organ in the known universe spend almost half its time living somewhere that does not exist? The answer sits in a part of your brain called the default mode network. Scientists discovered it almost by accident. They were doing brain scans and they expected to find that when a person was not doing anything specific, the brain would go quiet. Rest. Idle. Like a computer screen going dark. What they found instead was the opposite. When the brain had no external task to focus on, a specific network of regions lit up, not dimly, fully, intensely. Like a city seen from above at night. The default mode network is your brain's internal storytelling engine. It runs automatically when nothing else demands your attention. And what it generates, constantly and compulsively, are simulations, scenarios, mental movies starring you, the people in your life, the situations you have been in, the situations you might one day be in, and the ones you are quietly convinced will never happen, but cannot stop returning to anyway. New research published in April 2026 narrowed this down even further. Your brain, it turns out, switches between 2 distinct modes. One mode receives the world. It takes in what is happening around you, processes it, responds to it. The other mode generates the world. It constructs scenarios, runs simulations, projects futures, rewrites the past. And the generating mode, the one that lives inside your head, is on for nearly half of your entire waking life. This is not a flaw. This is a feature. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. Think about your ancestors for a moment. They lived in a world where the cost of being unprepared was death, a predator around the corner, a drought coming, a rival from another tribe who had made a threat. The brain that survived was not the brain that waited for things to happen. It was the brain that ran the scenario in advance, that imagined the threat before the threat arrived, that rehearsed the response before the moment of crisis. The brain that could simulate possible futures was the brain that navigated them successfully, and it passed that ability down, through every generation, to you. So when you lie in bed at 11 at night and your brain decides to replay a conversation you had 3 years ago, and this time you say the thing you should have said, and the other person finally understands, and everything resolves in a way it never actually did. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is running a simulation. It is trying to solve an unresolved problem. It is rehearsing for a situation it perceives as still being open. The problem is, the world you live in has changed almost infinitely faster than the brain that runs inside it. Your ancestors faced a handful of real threats from a known set of real people in a small geographical area. You face an infinite number of social situations, professional pressures, relationship uncertainties, and ambient anxieties that never fully resolve. There is no predator around the corner, but there is the email you sent that has not been replied to, the conversation with your manager that felt slightly off, the text from someone you love that said fine when fine never actually means fine. And your default mode network, built to run threat simulations, is running them constantly, on everything, about everything. Because it cannot tell the difference between a lion in the grass and a blue tick that has been sitting on red for 3 hours. Now here is the part that gets genuinely strange. When your brain imagines a scenario, the emotional response it generates is real. Not metaphorically real, physiologically real. Your nervous system responds to what you imagine happening almost identically to how it would respond to it actually happening. If you rehearse an argument in your head, your heart rate changes. Your cortisol rises. Your body is responding to a threat that exists only inside your own skull. You can stress yourself out with a conversation that never took place. You can feel humiliated by a rejection that was entirely fictional. You can grieve a relationship that only existed in your head. And none of it requires another person to be involved at all. This is why you can spend 20 minutes in the shower, having a fight with someone, and emerge feeling genuinely drained. Because your nervous system just went through the physiological experience of a conflict without anyone else in the room. Psychologist Susan David put it this way: brooding on emotions is quite literally the experience of going over and over and over emotions in a way that does not arrive at any sense of insight. When you ruminate, you feel like you are solving the problem, but you are not. You are just rewinding the tape, and the tape is set on loop. Now let us talk about what is actually in the scenarios, because this is where it gets uncomfortably specific, because you know exactly which ones you have. The relationship ones first. You are in the car alone, and suddenly you are having a conversation with someone you used to love. And in this conversation, they finally say the thing they never said in real life. Or you say the thing you never had the courage to say. And the version of the relationship you are building in your head is so vivid, so emotionally complete, that it starts to feel like a real memory. Researchers at Boston University found that people with high levels of this kind of immersive imagining can actually start to misremember which events really happened and which ones they only imagined. The line between what was and what you wished was starts to blur. Then there are the career ones. The version of yourself in 5 years who made the different choice. The email you could send that would change everything. The conversation with your boss where you finally say what you actually think, and instead of it going badly, they look at you with a kind of respect they have never shown before, and everything shifts. You do not send the email. You do not have the conversation, but you have lived them both, in full cinematic detail, dozens of times. The revenge fantasy is its own category. The person who wronged you finally understanding what they did. Not in a vague way, in a specific way, with specific words, in a specific location, wearing specific clothes, saying exactly the thing you need to hear. You have written this scene so many times, your brain has made it feel like something that actually happened. Except, it did not. And they probably do not think about you at all. And then there are the ones you feel slightly ashamed of. The version of yourself that is admired, that walks into the room and the room notices. That someone, somewhere, finally sees in the way you have always wanted to be seen. Not for ego, for something deeper than that. The scenario is a rehearsal for a feeling of being enough that your real life has not consistently delivered. This last kind has a name. Researchers call it compensatory fantasy. A clinical psychologist named Eli Sommer at the University of Haifa coined the term maladaptive daydreaming in 2002 to describe what happens when this kind of imagining crosses from a background hum into something that consumes hours every day and starts to replace real life rather than supplement it. He found that people in this pattern often have unmet emotional needs, that reality has not satisfied. The fantasy is not an escape from life, it is a correction of it. The brain building the version of experience it believes it should be having. Research on 539 adults who met the criteria for this kind of immersive imagining found something that should give you pause. People who reported feeling powerful in the real world did not do this. People who felt confident in their relationships did not do this. The ones who lost hours to fantasy were overwhelmingly people who felt unseen, unheard, insufficiently connected, or quietly convinced that the life they were actually living was not the one they were supposed to have. The fantasy is a symptom, but the symptom is pointing at something real. Here is what makes this genuinely complicated. The scenario habit is not all bad, not even close. The same mechanism that generates the revenge fantasy also generates the creative solution. The same default mode network that keeps you up at night imagining a confrontation also wires together connections your conscious mind cannot access. Einstein said he thought in images, not in words. The brain's generative mode is where creativity lives, where empathy comes from, where the ability to understand what another person might be thinking or feeling is built. The capacity to imagine the future in enough detail to plan for it is one of the most sophisticated things a brain can do. And it is the exact same capacity that creates the 11-minute shower argument with someone you have not spoken to in 2 years. The Harvard study found something people get wrong about this. It is often assumed that when your mind wanders to pleasant thoughts, you must be feeling good, but the data said otherwise. People were no happier when their minds wandered to pleasant topics than when their minds stayed on whatever they were actually doing. The problem was not the destination of the wandering, it was the wandering itself. The absence from the present moment was the cost, regardless of where the mind had gone. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind, not because the scenarios are bad, because the life you are missing while you are inside them is the only one that is actually happening. So what do you do with all of this? The first thing is simply to see it clearly, not to judge it, not to be frightened by it, but to recognize what it is. Your brain is doing something ancient and automatic. It is running simulations to keep you safe, to process what is unresolved, to rehearse for situations it perceives as threatening. Most of the time, it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that something is unfinished. Some need that reality has not met. Some situation that your nervous system has not yet been given permission to close. The scenarios that repeat the most are pointing at the things that matter most. The argument you rehearse over and over is the relationship you have not yet made peace with. The career fantasy you return to every day is the desire your life has not yet been given permission to pursue. The version of yourself that finally feels seen is telling you, in the only language your brain knows how to use, in the quiet moments, exactly what you are still hungry for. The second thing is this. The scenario is a rehearsal, but at some point, the rehearsal has to end and the performance has to begin. The email, the conversation, the choice. The version of events your brain has been constructing in the background, with more precision and more emotional honesty than you have brought to your actual decisions, is trying to tell you something. Not to remain in the fantasy, but to let the fantasy show you what you actually want. And then, to go and want it. Out loud, in the real world, with real risk, with real people, in real time. Because the shower will eventually go cold, and when it does, you will be standing in your real life again. The only question is whether you did anything with what your brain was trying to tell you while the water was still warm.